This all happened around 1998, give or take a year. I was around 22 years old at the time and had been dating this incredible girl for about a year and a half. She was drop-dead gorgeous, smart, and funny, so naturally, I was head over heels for her. Even though she was only a year younger than me, she still lived with her strict dad. He had a bunch of rules for her, like curfews. Even though she was 21, it was kind of ridiculous because he saw her as this innocent girl, but she wasn't even new to relationships. Despite her dad's disapproval, we kept dating, but it became more challenging since she had to sneak around. She would often use her cousin as an excuse to see me, but in reality, she would spend time at his place to create an alibi. She claimed they had a close bond since childhood, so it seemed normal to her. As time went on, I discovered that her so-called cousin wasn't actually her cousin. He was the son of her dad's best friend. She explained that she had always referred to him as a cousin and considered him like family. However, I started noticing more and more things that seemed strange, and it made me extremely suspicious. She told me that she was going to have lunch at a specific restaurant and then come to my place. Soon after, I received a message on my pager asking me to meet at Red Lobster at 12. Then I received another message clarifying that it was actually meant for her dad. I hurriedly went to the restaurant and noticed her car, so I parked far away. Another car arrived, and her so-called cousin got out. They greeted each other with hugs and kisses before going inside. Feeling miserable, I went back home to wallow in my sadness. I canceled our date for that day but didn't let her know what I had discovered. Soon, I came up with a wicked plan. Let me tell you about something that happened earlier in our relationship. One day, while she was getting dressed, I took a close-up Polaroid picture of her backside. I didn't think she would mind since it wasn't possible to identify her from the photo. However, she became incredibly furious. I had never seen her so angry before. She was determined to fight for that picture, but I made no effort to stop her. She tried to tear it up but couldn't. I asked her to give it to me so I could cut it up. She grabbed a pen and started marking on it, then found some scissors and cut it into pieces. Finally, I burned the remains right in front of her. She stayed angry for quite some time and kept reminding me repeatedly that she absolutely despised the idea of having any explicit pictures of herself in existence. I can't emphasize enough how much she detested the thought of anyone possessing photos of her. It terrified her. We didn't talk for about a week, and our relationship was on the verge of breaking up. However, she eventually realized that I genuinely hadn't thought it would bother her and that I would never attempt something like that again. Moving on, I had my plan all set, and we made arrangements for her to come over to my place. I was renting a decent house with my best friend, but my room was like that of a typical bachelor. Scanty furniture. I had a bed, a computer table with a chair, a dresser, and an alarm clock on the floor next to my bed. I went to the kitchen and fetched an extra chair, positioning it at the end of my bed. Then I grabbed another alarm clock and placed it on the chair. My intention was to make it obviously seem out of place. She came over, and we had closeness together. I remained calm and continued this arrangement for another couple of weeks, engaging in closeness activities 2 or 3 times per week. I made sure to explore different positions and angles, positioning her in a way that the alarm clock was directly in her line of sight. I wanted to prolong this situation, but eventually decided that it had gone on long enough. On our last day together, just before we left, I unplugged the clock, placed it next to my computer, and moved the chair to a different room. I made sure she saw me but made it seem like I was simply tidying up. I started feeling uncertain and hesitant about my plan because I knew how cruel it was. I chose to wait for a day, which turned into 2, and after about a week, I finally decided to call her and confront the situation. I still wasn't sure if I wanted to seek revenge or not. I made the call and informed her that I knew she was seeing her supposed cousin. I couldn't recall his name. She denied it at first, but I mentioned that someone had told me they saw them kissing. Eventually, she admitted to it but claimed that it had only started that week. I asked her how she could be involved with her supposed cousin, to which she replied that he wasn't actually her cousin. We argued some more, and I revealed that I had known for a month. Then she tried to shift the blame onto me for not saying anything when I found out, and she made a snarky comment, although I can't recall the exact words. Then I informed her that there was one final thing that she would really want to know. Me, do you remember that alarm clock sitting on the chair by my bed? Her, yeah. Me, did you ever wonder why it was there? Her, not really. Me, think about the way we position ourselves during our recent closeness, with you facing the foot of that bed and so on. Her, what the heck are you saying? Me, that alarm clock was actually a freaking spy cam, you disgusting cheating witch. I angrily hung up the phone. For some reason, I had called from a payphone. My pager kept buzzing like crazy for the next several hours. It vibrated non-stop for a solid 30 minutes before I turned it back on. My home phone was flooded with voicemail messages. Her messages started with screams and cries, then turned into threats, followed by begging and even offering bribes. Then she would go through the same cycle all over again. The next day she came to my house and knocked on the door for at least an hour, but I didn't answer. The calls and messages kept coming for weeks, although they became less frequent. She also showed up at my house a few more times, but I never answered, and sometimes I wasn't even home. Finally, I answered one of her phone calls, but when she started asking about the tapes, I told her that I had no idea what she was talking about. I listened to her beg, cry, and plead, and every time she mentioned the tapes I would simply say, I don't know what tapes you're talking about. Then I hung up and never spoke to her again. The calls and messages eventually stopped, and I moved on with my life. To this day, she doesn't know that there was never a hidden camera. It was just an old radio alarm clock that looked bulky enough to pass as a spy cam if you weren't paying close attention. I grew to regret it because it probably tortured her for a long time, and it only took me about 6 months to get over my broken heart. Second story, let's start with the main people involved, me, my ex-wife Pepper, target number 1 for revenge, her boyfriend Steve, target number 2 for revenge, Steve's ex-wife Maria, my partner in the revenge plan, my daughter Sarah, and my friend Jason, my accomplice in the revenge. Now that we have that covered, let's go over some background information. Pepper and I had a turbulent marriage. Looking back, I was deeply in love with her, but I realize now that she was more interested in the money and convenience I provided. Before we got married, she already had a son named Bob, who has always been obsessed with pills, and I had another son, whose name isn't important, whom I had full custody of. While we were married, Sarah was born. I tried my best to make the marriage work, but eventually, we couldn't hold it together anymore. We decided to separate, and because of my job that required some traveling and my custody of my son, I moved back to my hometown in another state. This way, my parents could help me out, but I also kept an apartment in the town where Pepper and Sarah lived so that I could still spend as much time as possible with my daughter. During that time, I reached out to my best friend Jason, who happens to be a lawyer with his own firm, and asked him to create a child support agreement for us. It's crucial to mention that the agreement solely focused on child support and didn't cover custody, visitation, or anything else. So for approximately a year, this was our arrangement. I would spend a month with Sarah while my parents took care of my other son, and then I would spend a month with my son. Almost exactly a year later, I couldn't afford to maintain 2 households any longer, and Pepper wanted to move back to her hometown, which was in a different state but closer to where I lived. So I gave up the apartment, and she made the move. We continued in this new situation for a couple more years. Pepper and I remained friendly and even attempted to reconcile our relationship a few times, but it never worked out. I still had deep feelings for her, but we couldn't agree on important matters like where to live. I had to push myself to move on, so I started dating. On the other hand, she had been dating almost immediately after I moved out. Although I still loved her, our relationship transitioned more into that of good friends rather than husband and wife. Eventually, she met Steve. I wasn't given much information about him except that he was a certified ethical hacker, and that was his profession, which becomes important later on. While they were dating, she would send me texts about their dates. She even texted me on the day they first became close. It hurt me deeply, and in hindsight, I think this was what she wanted. But I tried to play the role of a supportive friend and confidant. Out of nowhere, Pepper informs me that she and Steve broke up after 6 months of dating, and she suddenly realizes that she's deeply in love with me. Since it's the beginning of summer, she packs her suitcases and travels to my state. The plan is for them to spend the summer with me and see if they like it here or not. And let me tell you, we had an incredible summer together. All the kids got along well. Even Bob enjoyed being here. So Pepper officially declares that we're back together and they're moving in with me. We went to register my daughter for school, and she even joined a Pee Wee cheerleading team for the summer. She made some great friends and was really enjoying her time here. However, there was one issue. Pepper still had an apartment with all her furniture and belongings in it. I offered to go with my truck and help her move everything, but she insisted that she and Bob could handle it on their own. So they set off to pack up their things and then head to their new home. As you can probably imagine, things didn't go according to plan. After being home for only 3 days, Pepper dropped a bombshell on me. She declared that under no circumstances would she move, and that she and Steve were in love and planning to live together. To say I was devastated is an understatement. I couldn't comprehend why she did this to me. The worst part was that she left it up to me to break the heartbreaking news to Sarah. When I told her, the devastated look on her face transformed my feelings of hurt into anger. Then, Sarah broke down and started pleading to stay with me, and she began revealing everything. She shared details about how her mom would leave with Steve for days, leaving Bob in charge. Sarah had to learn how to cook for herself at the age of 8 because Bob would spend the money on, well, pills, and remain high the whole time. If Bob wasn't left in charge, Pepper would rely on her niece, who had multiple felony convictions, to take care of Sarah. Sarah also recounted the first time she met Steve. He came to their house, barely said hello, and then he and her mom disappeared into the bedroom and had loud closeness. Sarah was outside the door crying her eyes out, but they completely ignored her and continued. This was how my 8-year-old daughter learned about closeness, and even after 7 years, she is still in counseling trying to recover from those traumatic experiences. At this point, my anger has transformed into pure rage. I immediately informed Pepper that there was absolutely no way Sarah was going back to that situation, and I was prepared to fight her tooth and nail to protect my daughter. In response, Pepper took swift action and arranged for an emergency hearing in her state, aiming to force Sarah to return. I had to act quickly, but I managed to secure a lawyer and fortunately won the hearing with ease. Despite Pepper arriving late and using a disability as an excuse to the judge agreed that given the absence of a custody agreement and the troubling accusations I had gathered, it wasn't in Sarah's best interest to remain with me for now. I had emerged victorious in the first battle, but the victory was short-lived. Within an hour of the hearing, my inbox was flooded with phishing emails and texts. I also started receiving password reset requests and multi-factor authentication codes from my bank, Facebook, Reddit, and other accounts. I knew without a doubt that Steve was behind these malicious actions. The very next day, Jason called me with distressing news. His law firm's website, email, and phone accounts had been hacked. Since he had to report the incident to the court and was working on a somewhat high-profile case, the FBI got involved. To say I was furious would be an understatement. These two individuals had not only ruined my life, but they had also harmed my daughter and tarnished my lifelong friend's reputation. It was time for them to face the consequences, and I was determined to make them pay dearly. I became a man on a mission, spending hours delving into Steve and Pepper's backgrounds, searching for any incriminating information. I had significant success with Pepper. I discovered social media posts of her staying out late, drinking, which correlated with Sarah's absences and tardiness at school. I found numerous pictures of her engaging in enjoyable activities with 2 unfamiliar children. I even found neighbors who were willing to testify that Sarah had to beg for food, because she was often left in the care of either Bob or the felon. I knew I had strong evidence against Pepper. On the other hand, Steve had taken extra precautions to secure his accounts, making it difficult for me to find any dirt on him, and it was driving me crazy. Then it dawned on me to check LinkedIn. My hunch paid off. While there wasn't much information on his profile, I discovered Maria, his ex-wife, through his connections. I reached out to her, and she gladly accepted my contact. Maria and I quickly became close friends. She despised Pepper, and rightfully so, as they had both abandoned their children like my daughter. I gained valuable insights from Maria. To keep it brief, Maria and Steve had recently divorced. In their custody agreement, Steve ended up with the house, the bank account, and most of the savings, while his child support payments were lower than usual. Maria willingly gave up all that money in exchange for having control and ensuring the safety of her kids. They had a detailed custody agreement with strict rules for Steve to follow. If Steve violated any of those rules, he would face severe consequences. According to the agreement, he would be required to sell the house and split the proceeds with Maria. His child support payments would double, leading to his financial ruin. Interestingly, Steve hadn't blocked Maria on social media, and he would regularly send texts boasting about his supposedly great life without her. Many of these texts even included pictures of Pepper. Maria and I compared our findings, shared evidence, and devised a plan together. And now it's time for payback. First, I teamed up with Jason, and he informed the FBI investigator about the hacking attempts I had experienced. We suspected it was the same person behind it. The investigator acted swiftly and reached out to me. I shared all the information I'd gathered and revealed my suspicions about the culprit. Then he asked me an interesting question: did I know where Steve worked? Well, as a matter of fact, I did, thanks to Maria. It turns out Steve wasn't as skilled a hacker as he believed. The FBI had already traced the hacking incident involving Jason back to a company, the very same company where Steve was employed. Once a conversation with the FBI concluded, I wasted no time and called Steve's workplace to file a complaint. I informed the manager that someone was attempting to hack into my accounts and expressed my certainty that it was Steve behind it. Naturally, they didn't take it too seriously since I had no solid proof. Little did they know, they were about to receive a visit from a special agent very soon. The following week was a living nightmare for Steve and Pepper. Pepper received the divorce papers, and her lawyer was presented with all the evidence I had gathered. According to my lawyer, it was the most comprehensive investigation he had ever seen. I had concrete proof of 40 instances of tardiness and 19 absences, all linked to nights out drinking with Steve. I had undeniable evidence of them abandoning my daughter for extended periods of time. Maria even provided me with a photo taken at 2 a.m. on the night before the emergency hearing, showing Steve and Pepper drinking at a tattoo parlor. At that same hearing, Pepper arrived late and claimed it was due to a disability. Steve was served with the news that he had violated the entire custody agreement. Maria had pictures from me that proved he was with Pepper on nights when the kids were supposed to be with him, and they were left unsupervised. She also had evidence of unauthorized contact between Steve and Pepper, which went against the custody agreement. The fallout was truly remarkable to witness. Steve lost his job. My complaint, along with an older hacking complaint and the FBI's involvement, left his employers no choice but to let him go. While he managed to avoid legal consequences, as the FBI couldn't directly link the hacking to him, the reason for his firing became widely known, making it impossible for him to find another IT job. He had to sell the house, liquidate his investments and bank accounts, and give half to Maria. Since he no longer had a source of income, his child support payments remained the same. The last I heard, he was working at a grocery store. So in total, his income plummeted from over $200,000 a year to less than $40,000. Pepper had a rough time during the divorce proceedings. The judge sided with me on every issue. I was granted sole custody and the authority to make all decisions regarding Sarah. Pepper was ordered to attend counseling, and her visits with Sarah and Bob must be supervised by a neutral third-party supervisor, with the expenses covered by Pepper. Sarah is making great progress. Although she still requires counseling, she's excelling in school and has made numerous friends. She doesn't see her mom often, but honestly, she's much happier and better off without her.